I made this in tutorial years ago and now I'm putting it to the test to see if it actually can help you write better music. Let's see if this advice still holds up as I make a Synthwave Metal track. I'll put a link for the full tutorial if you're curious to watch it. Let's begin by hearing what I have to say about synthwave drums. This is the first part of a series of videos. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss the next steps. I'm so purple. Nobody told me to trim that awful beard. Thank you guys. Let's load Drum Machine Designer or any sampler you have for drums. Today's samples are from Bucher. They are the free Vaporwave drum kit. Does the link still work? You know what? Synthwave is about nostalgia, so I'm going to use the same sample pack as I did in this tutorial. Let's get a kick. Maybe the first one. Let's get a snare. I like this one. Let's select a closed hi-hat. Now let's see how to do a drum pattern. As we said, we want the snare on each second and fourth beat of the bar. Now for the kick, we'll want it usually on the third and third beat of each bar. So it goes like poo, ka, poo, ka. Okay, we have our kit pieces now, sounds something like that. Let's try to create a pattern. Okay, I started at 77 BPM. I want to create something a bit slower, a bit evil-ish. Maybe we can create the typical synthwave pattern. We're still in very basic territory right there. It's gonna sound way better later, I promise. Let's duplicate that. The snare sounds really weak, but Past Me has a really great trick for you. Now to make it sound a little bit more like an real 80s drums, I wanted to show you the gated snare trick. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna add reverb to the snare so it sounds way bigger, like in the 80s. Like think about the drum sound in The Air Tonight by Phil Collins. You know, I'll let you check the video if you want to check the whole process on how to do a gated reverb. I also did that in some previous videos. You can check that as well. I'm going to do that real quick right now. Here's the gated snare. I'll add some processing to the drum kit a bit later. So I'm just gonna duplicate it, loop it, bop it. We're gonna want to make a nice tom break to go through an eventual next section. Let's hear my new tom pattern. Okay, the drum sounds a bit like ass, so I'm gonna check if I have some quick tips for a basic good drum sound. Amazing. A little ambient room reverb for our drums so it sounds a bit more lively. That's a good advice. With samples you don't have that room feeling you have when you usually have a real drum. A bit too much for the reverb, so what you can do is start at 0, increase the volume until you can hear the reverb, and then just back it off a little bit. You don't want your reverb to mask your drums. That's true, that's a good starting point. What you can do on your drum bus is to put a compressor to glue everything a bit together, thing like 2 or 3 dB maximum of gain reduction. I mean, it's kinda true, but it really depends of what you are trying to do. 2 to 3 dBs is a good starting point, but don't hesitate to experiment with your compressor settings. It really depends on what you're trying to do. I followed my past advice and added a reverb to the drum. It adds a bit of life and character to the drum. Then I added a bus compressor. So to keep it simple, the longer attack you're gonna have, the more the transients are gonna pass through the compressor. Here I'd like to boost a bit the transients, so I'm going to have a fast to medium attack and a quick release. I'm gonna keep those settings because I'm going to use parallel aggressor a bit later down the road. It's a really quick tool to add parallel compression and saturation to your sound. So let me bypass the plugin on and off just to see how it sounds. The saturation definitely adds a lot of character, and I also added a bit of EQ. So that's it for the bus processing. I'm not a fan of that snare though. Here's the drum without any processing, just the bare samples. And with all what we did, it sounds like that. Great, that's a cool start, don't you think? Let's keep the tutorial going. I want to show you how to do a bass sound. We'll want to start with a saw or a square wave, and this one I'm gonna transpose it 12 semitones up. Okay, I created some bass tones with my Mini Freak. That doesn't get that much love since I put out that industrial metal synth video. I basically followed the instructions I gave on the tutorial, so it's a really simple synth sound. I use two oscillators, which are basically sawtooth waves. There is the Superwave oscillator, which sounds a bit more 80s. I've put a bit of saturation to inflate the bass a bit. And I use the arpeggiator, which is in the Mini Freak, which is synced to Logic, and I've duplicated the patch with some chorus, and I cut a bit the bass frequency. That way I still have the main bass tone in the middle that expands a bit more on the stereo with the chorus. So both patches sounds like that together. Also, the chorus did impact the bass frequency, so I wanted that to keep as constant as possible. What am I saying next? Internet, what is going on? And what we want to play here is the fundamental notes that are gonna go with our chords. We need a better color for the synth bass. I think synth basses are purple. I have an idea for the notes for the bass. Let's try something. Simple, but it works. Fun fact, I remember when I did this 10-part video tutorial that at this point I had no idea whatsoever where I was going. It was just full blast improvisation. And I mean, at this point, nothing is really produced, so it just doesn't sound that good. For real, I was terrified. And I remember finishing the bass video and just thinking, what the heck am I doing? We can also use what we call layering, which is basically putting two layers of instruments in top of each other. Well, layering is basically what I did here with my two patches. Maybe I had some more later, but let's keep it that way for now. Okay, I want more tips on how to process my bass tone. Having just a bit of compression. Do you hear that? It was the sound of my MacBook ready for takeoff. Like making music and recording video was not his strength. Really not too much. Just 2 dBs of compression. Why? Just compress that bass. It reminds me of a discussion I saw a long time ago on a Facebook group. Someone was asking about compression, and this answer is just gold. Dynamics are for amateurs. I love that. All right, let's keep it going. The thing we can do is putting a sidechain on the bass from the kick. Yeah, I want to do that. The kick doesn't play on every beat, but I want that pumping effect. Flux Mini is a really simple plugin just to emulate that kind of stuff. Speaking of bass processing, let's compress the bass. Of course, you have to compress the bass before Flux Mini, or it doesn't make any sense. Let's bypass Flux Mini for to hear what we do with the compression. I'm going to use JST Heat. I just love that plugin. I'm going to use the Xalara processing. What it does is cutting your signal in 3 bands. That way you can compress the low end so it stays consistent and distort a bit the mid frequencies and the high frequencies. So before and after. Let's control the dynamic a bit further after that. Let's put Flux Mini in here with the drum. I think we're off to a good start.